Well, welcome. I just want to first say I completely understand that we are in such interesting times and we get to meet in interesting, connected ways. So I'm thankful that, I saw some folks from Marin and San Diego and different places, and yet we all come together in this one moment. I do want to begin by acknowledging all of my different teachers and people from the plants, the animals, the waters, but also from all around the world. And just as Holm was saying, I've had the great privilege of having a really diverse education from kind of academia and research, but most and prominently lately in the last decade or two, working with a lot of Indigenous folks. So I'm going to bring a multitude of perspectives. And let's just take a minute, to realize that we're all have these different perspectives, and I'm really excited. The question A part, or question and answer part, is kind of my favorite part, because then I get to learn from you guys, and I really get to think. So if you do have questions, or sometimes I flip my words, I have a little bit of dyslexia, just let me know, and Holland will interrupt me, and I will clarify any kind of questions or information you might have, but otherwise we'll wait till the end. So here we go, into the world of bears. I wanted to set the stage because I am sitting right now on the coast of Sonoma County. Occidental is the town that I live in and where my office is right now. And I want to set the stage of where we're going to go through this trip. So really where I am right now, and most of Sonoma County and certainly most of California, was predominantly grizzly country. And as we know or going to learn, sadly, there are no longer brown bears or grizzlies in California. Depending on who you talk to, the last grizzly bear was 1922 in Ventura, or some folks say, up in the North Bay area. They were extirpated for their skins, but a lot for meat during the gold rush. And enormous extirpation process or elimination of the grizzlies happened for entertainment. The bear bull stock market actually comes from this time period when grizzly bears and bulls were put into a pen and were set to battle against each other. And these amazing, mighty bears, these grizzlies that we have, often would take out a would take out a bull, but the bulls kept coming and coming until that grizzly was taken out. But the bear bull economy, and we're going to look a little bit at how deep things we take for granted are intertwined with bear culture and bear history. So up here in the top left-hand corner, this is Grizzly Mama and her two cubs from when I was working in Yellowstone. And all the rest of these photos are black bears. Today in California, the only bear we're really going to come across, unless you're in a zoo or wildlife park or something like that, is Ursus americanus, the American black bear. And just again, setting the stage on the history, we had these grizzly bears that were mostly in Sonoma County and across the North Bay, and then they were extirpated, and then there was a vacuum. And before we get into what happened in that vacuum, maybe you've heard that quote, nature abhors a vacuum. I wanted to look at the differences between grizzly and black bear. The one thing I really want to draw your attention to are these claws, because these claws show, which I love. I track animals in the old school way by their footprints. And so I get really into feet and function and morphology. And these claws tell us a lot about the lifestyle of these bears and what they were doing. So grizzlies had a tendency, and when I'm saying tendency, I'm going to talk about habitats. They had a tendency towards open areas and grasslands, and those long, long claws were excellent for digging and picking things out like grubs out of big open spaces. While black bears, they can dig, certainly. They tended more for closed-in forests, were more like, well, all bears eat everything. So let's just say we love them. If you like to eat like me, you gotta love the bears. So all bears eat everything, and there's certainly a habitat crossover, but the black bears are more suited with those small claws for climbing trees, eating buds, grabbing fruit. If you've ever been to an orchard where a bear has been, you'll see all those broken branches from the black bears sitting in the middle of the tree and just pulling all the fruit towards them. So if you can imagine a time when there were either anthropogenic fires or there were fires that were coming in through lightning, there's a lot of grasslands in Sonoma County and all around California in these open spaces and open chaparral, which are even oak savannas, which are now taken up either by development or highways, huge housing complexes, stores, and we have encroachment of trees from lack of grazers and from lack of fire. So the habitat that was so prime for grizzlies when they were around and kept open by fire and multitude of grazers is now more suited for black bears, although black bears do well in both. So here, kind of still setting the stage and giving us a background, is a map of the historic range of black bears. And you can see it's mostly in these really dense redwood conifer forests and in the mountains and up here in the pine trees. These are the like San Bernardino, backcountry of Santa Barbara ranges, these really steep coastal ranges. Recently, and when I say recently, I'm talking like the last 2 to 3 decades, the black bears are starting to fill in the areas that were predominantly grizzly bear. And part of that is because we now have a habitat, and part of it is because the grizzly bears aren't there to kind of nudge their way. There's no shared habitat that has to happen. And here we are in Sonoma County, and you can see, and in fact, this map is quite a bit, it was the best one I could find to depict this. But this whole part of Sonoma County is now filled and would be part of the range. And there was a bear that is hanging out, or there is a bear that's hanging out over here in Point Reyes, Bolinas area that we believe dispersed from the southern Mayacamas. But the black bears are starting to move into these areas and colonize places where they weren't historically. So what I love about the work that I get to do is that if you can imagine this as a wave and these bears are moving forward, we're a little bit on a discovery mission. Black bears were not here before, right? We don't really know what black bears do in Sonoma County. We don't know how they're going to act. We don't know what they do, in San Luis Obispo and southern Monterey. We know, and we have lots of oral history and recorded histories of how grizzly bears were interacting, but black bears is a whole new exploration, a frontier untouched. So I'm pretty excited about that. I moved up to Sonoma County in 2012 from Coastal Range in Southern California. And the very next year, right down at the corner of where I live, there was a black bear sighting. And it was big news, and it was pretty exciting. And this is a different bear. There were actually 2 bears that year. This is a young male dispersing. And I just really appreciate this quote. I'll let you take a look at it. Jim Coleman, he is a grassland ecologist and botanist. And this bear got into their kind of backyard compound, and there was a big jar of fish emulsion. And it was maybe like 50 gallons, no, maybe not 50 gallons, 20 gallons. And this bear just took the fish emulsion and literally ripped off the top and drank it. If you can imagine, maybe some of you even have teenagers or work with teenagers, and as they're growing, they're almost like bottomless pits. They're like, more food, more food. Bears are just this way. That is an adolescent bear dispersing, and it's like, I need food, and fish emulsion is perfect. What I like about this quote is that we have to realize that our refrigerators and freezers and gardens and bees and fruit trees are part of an ecosystem for a bear. They don't see it as separate. They're like, oh no, that's the human space over there, and our ecosystem is over here. Bears are looking at us as part of nature, which I really love, because we are part of nature and we're totally intertwined in that relationship. And bears really push our boundaries that way. So here we go into the boundaries of bears becoming normal in the North Bay. It really tests how we need to live. There are many states like Colorado or the Adirondacks and Montana who have never not lived with bears, or have always lived with bears. They hadn't had this kind of lull in their bear population and forgotten how to live with bears. I'll talk to the old timers around here and they're like, no, there are no bears in Sonoma County. This is a new thing. Well, not so. We just had an extirpation event of the grizzlies, and now the bears are coming back in. But we used to know how to live with bears, and Indigenous people all across the Northern Hemisphere, not just in California, but yes, a lot in California, had a relationship with these bears. And so a lot of my work is how do we start to reintegrate these relationships and live peacefully with them. The other thing that is becoming a norm, and was also a norm, but again, forgotten through, it's almost like you could think of extirpation of fire since the early 1920s, when there was a lot of fire suppression going on. And, again, nature abhors a vacuum, and there was a vacuum of fire that wasn't happening. And it has swept all across our area. And, the first big giant fire that was really on the radar for a lot of people was the Tubbs fire, but several of these photos are they're actually all three from different fires. This photo down here is from Paradise Fire, just a couple weeks after that. This is the Bootleg Fire up in the Klamath Range. And I put it just because it was such an expansive scale that we were looking at, and yet within it, it was quite patchy. And this is the Kincaid Fire of 2018 over here on the right. Can you all see my cursor when I move my cursor? Okay, great. So not only is this increase of bears in California, black bears in California, on the rise, fires are certainly, I don't know if I would say on the rise, but they are becoming more frequent again as we stop suppressing them. And so what we're really going to look at with that kind of background is this relationship of bears and fires and what I've been finding through my work. So as Helen said, I'm the lead on the NBBC, which is the North Bay Bear Collaborative. In 2017, in the beginning of 2017, there was caught on camera, wildlife camera that was set out, a mama bear and two cubs. And prior to that, we had these kind of questions like, oh, we'd see bears occasionally, but there's a question, are they resident bears? Are they just moving through? Where are they going? Where are they coming to? And then we had cubs, and it changed the whole thing. So a bunch of us got together and we decided we should talk about this. And how do we get on the forward edge of bears so that we're not turning into something like Tahoe or Mammoth or Yosemite? And then actually the Tubbs fire came in and kind of took away our inertia, and priorities went to different places. But in 2018, I started realizing there are a lot of bears and quite a lot of cubs, because I'm out there just wandering and tracking a lot and hanging out with these guys. And I said, oh, I think we need to bring this back together, because as our Sonoma County population increases and the bear population increases, it's inevitable that there's going to be, at the very least, conflict, and contact, but possibly a lot of nuisance things happening and depredation or the killing of the bears. So we really wanted to get ahead. So we have now formalized into this North Bay Bear Collaborative with all of those members that you'd seen in the last slide. And really, our biggest goal is to help people to remember, like to re-member and bring back together our relationship with bears. And we're doing that with research and a lot of outreach and public messaging. We're going to get into this kind of stewardship and tending along with the research later on in this lecture. We're doing a lot with youth. Part of the goal of the North Bay Bear Collaborative is that all of the people who are standing there and sitting on at the table now, when we're no longer there, we have a legacy of youth that are coming up behind us. So we are working with quite a few youth. And then this piece becomes incredibly integral when we start to look at fire and bears, is as we build our biological diversity, cultural diversity is able to come back in. And those may seem separate, but I'll promise I'll weave those together by the end of this lecture. So we share a lot of stories. This is just kind of a broader picture. We are doing research, and we spend a lot of time tracking the bears and getting out there and looking at track and sign, which is so fun because we're finding behaviors in plants and timing that doesn't exist in other parts of California. So the tracking piece has been really fun. We have an ongoing mapping project starting in 2013 and still going on now, of where people are telling us where they've seen bears, or they're giving us pictures. There's a lot of wildlife cameras out there. And this is a woefully underfilled in map, just because I have thousands of data points that still need to be entered. So if any of you are interested, let me know. If any of you are looking for an intern project, let me know. We have lots of data points, so we can fill out this map and start to figure out ages and dispersal. So the research project that I really want to talk about, that it's the forefront right now, which Pepperwood is part of, is Pepperwood's part of the Bear Collaborative, is our DNA project. We are really curious as to how these bears are related and how they're dispersing, where they're going, who's related to who. I was trained by Dr. James Halfpenny in Yellowstone. He's a carnivore biologist and was one of my teachers and mentors. And he worked on the wolf reintroduction program. And in that program, he has now, since that was 1995, he's put together family trees of the wolf packs. And so my long-term vision is like, oh, we could have family trees of our bears in the North Bay. And I would love to see that lineage. And Stephen Hammerich, who's on the panel, he just put together a poster that he'll be presenting at the Wildlife Society. And there is one little mini family tree. We have like 3 people on our family tree, so it's happening. And we're excited about that. What this DNA project entails is we train volunteers literally how to find scat. You know, and you go out there and you find scat and you take the epithelial cells out, and we are working with UC Davis, Dr. Ben Sachs, and we send these samples out and back to Dr. Ben Sachs, and then he gives us all the analysis and runs it through all the amazing computers in his lab, and then we start to get relationships, and we'll show you that a little bit. Also, this project is really in huge collaboration with California Department of Fish and Wildlife as well. So in 20,
Megan,
yes.
quick clarification.
Yes.
A few slides back, you said not being like Tahoe and Yosemite, and wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on what you mean by that.
Great. Tahoe and Yosemite and Mammoth, they have, I don't want to, anyway, they have a lot of bear conflict. I'm like, how do I say it? They just have a lot of bear conflict. Like Tahoe, a lot of the houses are electrified, even the doorknobs, because the bears have become so clever that they were learning how to open doorknobs. So you have to have, they have electrified doormats that they put on because it shocks the bears. Because there's such an enormous amount of food in Tahoe in the winters, and also Yosemite and Mammoth, a lot of the bears have stopped hibernating. So now they're mating and living year round. So it's become a really big, human nuisance. And also probably a bear nuisance, because the bears don't love to be harassed by us. So we're trying to get on the forefront of those challenges. Great, thanks. So back to the DNA study, so that we can figure out how these bears are moving around, and also how many bears we have to kind of mitigate these conflicts I was talking about that are happening in the Sierras. We had our first pilot project in 2020. We have over 50 volunteers working on this project. It's wonderful. If you're interested in volunteering and you want to go out and collect scat, let me know. It's actually a lot more fun than it sounds, and it's not so stinky, because bears eat a lot of fruits, and so it's actually very sweet smelling. Last year, we're hoping to do 12 sites, but I think it was 9 out of the 13 or 12 that we did, they all burned. So we only got 4 sites done. We had 157 fecal samples from transit. So we go out and we walk a 4-kilometer square plot, and we do that over 4 days. And on those transects, we collect as much scat as we can. We also collected 16 opportunistic scats, which are scats that you might be out there and you're hiking around and you're like, oh, there's a bear scat. And so people will call us. We have an emergency scat hotline if you're interested in being on the emergency scat collection team. And then we are also collecting hair. Hair is a little bit more difficult because you need to get to the bulb of the hair. But overall, it was a great year for a pilot project, given the constraints of COVID, of poor air quality. That was that summer that was intensely hot with 110 degree days on multiple days, and with the intense fires. So it was 9 out of 16 of our plots burned. But with that, we were able to identify 30 individual bears, which is a great start. So we're trying to figure that out. We're still parsing relationships and getting into more detail about that. So this year we had, again, 16 plots. So here's what our big map looks like, just so you know. We're trying to get equal distribution across the North Bay. So as of right now, the counties that we are including are Sonoma County, Napa County, Lake County, and we do have opportunistic scat from Marin County this year because of that one dispersing bear that made it all the way over to Bolinas. So these red squares, they represent the 4 square kilometer transects. The yellow are open or preserved space that we actually have access to. Sonoma County is really interesting in that it has a lot of space that's not developed, but depending on whom you speak to, 85 to 95% of Sonoma County is privately owned. So access in Sonoma County is a little bit more difficult and it is also the most parcelized county in California. So if you want to go and do a 4 square kilometer plot, you may have to negotiate 100 and sometimes, 1,000 different little parcels, and that's a lot of people to talk to. So we have to be really selective on where we choose to get our data from. So here you can see this was actually Pepperwood from the year before. Each dot here, if I were to expand it, represents where a scat was picked up. By far, the highest density of bears is in the kind of northern Mayakama range. And it's really interesting because you have, so in California, the highest density of bears is in Mendocino and Humboldt County. But there's a straight line from Mendocino, if you imagine Mendocino National Forest up here, and then you get Ukiah, Hopland, and then, from Hopland down, it's a straight line right into the northern Mayacamas. But you also have over here Lake County. And so there's this beautiful V that kind of comes together right here in this area, Knights Valley. And Stephen and I and Tasha and a bunch of different people are working on a Knights Valley habitat corridor project to start to monitor. Certainly wildlife is being monitored, but also monitoring the bears. So this is kind of what our chaotic plot system looks like, but when you're down on the ground, it's much more interesting. So we did do the study again. We had 265 samples this year, and we didn't get burned out. We did have a couple of hot days, and we did have a few smoky days that we weren't able to be out. But overall, it was a great collection time. So all of that to say that there are a lot of eyes on the ground and a lot of opportunities to figure out how these bears are doing in fire, because I'm going to go back to this map. So many of these areas have burned. We had the big fire all along the coast, and we have a plot in Stillwater and Willow Creek, of which we have found scat in both of these sites along the coast. Almost all of these areas over here in the Mayacamas and in Napa have burned, and we have some pre and post data, which is really exciting. So with that, I'm going to get into a little bit. I'm just telling you anecdotal stories. So I want to be very clear that as of now, most of the information I'm going to give you are observations. We haven't been able to pull to quantify data yet, but it seems pretty compelling how the bears are responding. And I'll let you kind of choose your story and what you think and how they're responding. So bears love telephone poles. It's really interesting, but mostly it's because there are these prominent features that go across an open field, and prominent features are really important to wildlife. So they'll go in and they'll bite them and they rub against them and they appreciate them because they're visual signifiers of how to communicate with other animals, which is great. So these are the telephone poles in Modini Mayakama Preserve, which is one of not only one of our sites that we do sampling on, but they also are part of our collaborative. And so you can see how the bears will destroy a telephone pole. Well, so here's that telephone pole up close. That's the one that was on, it's a series of telephone poles going through the Modini Preserve. This is my friend. Up here, a bear is biting. This is a bear bite. So my friend's about 5'8". This is a very tall, large bear standing up on its back. And here is post Kincade fire. This was just maybe 3 months after the fire had come through. And while it's not the same pole, it is in the same series of poles, and the bears are still marking them. You can see how it was charred. Here's a little claw mark, but there's the hair getting in there and rubbing around. So the bears came right back using the poles again. And this was about, like I said, 3 to 4 months after that fire. Again, we're back in Modini Preserve. Here is a beautiful bear trail going through the grass. And this was just hours old. I got to trail this bear. It was really fun. And this is Preston from Humboldt State. He is a bear biologist now working with the Yurok tribe. And this is Ginny Fifield. She is an incredible proponent of wildlife and kind of like the wildlife camera guru. And she's gotten just bitten by the bears and loves them. And so what Preston is showing us is how bears will come in and bite the tops off trees. This bear and this bear we believe to be the same. Ginny has caught this big male, which may very well also be the same bear, on camera many times. And so we have been tracking this bear, yes, with cameras, but literally on foot, following this bear around. And then this was even closer. This was about 6 weeks after the Kincade fire. My husband and I went out to see what was going on with this big bear and how it had changed its behavior. And lo and behold, here, I mean, this is a big track. My husband's about 6'2", so his hands are really big, and you can see how large this track is. And this is a bear trail coming through. So this big, large male is still doing the rounds. What was really interesting was this area had been dog hair thicket of conifers, and you were not able to walk through this area. There's not even a coyote or fox was making it through. And the bear would walk up. So this was a fire road or a timber road up here, and the bear would walk up this road, and you would catch it. It was really easy to catch it on camera. So I had been walking up the road and I couldn't find any sign of the bear. So I just dropped down just below the road, and sure enough, there was a habitual trail. The bear had changed its behavior. So what I believe to be not as exposed on the road, but using just the ridge top as a little bit of cover. And in speaking to other people who've been walking in areas where there have been bears known prior to fire and post-fire, they've seen that behavior too, where the bear is still there, but it's changed its trail to be using topographical features for cover, whereas it used to be fully overgrown. The other thing that to me has been really interesting about this fire, particularly where the dog hair thicket was, is there was actually kind of a desert of food for bears in that particular area over this 100 acres, because it was conifers, but it wasn't even conifers that were providing food. And when the fire came through in 2018, as I said, I was out there, again, this was just a cut, maybe, so I had to wait because I went out twice. I think it was probably like March. The amount of food plants that were coming up, there was elderberry, there were bulbs that the bears eat, there were wild strawberries, there were more forb diversity. So the fires are actually providing a lot of incredible food diversity for the bears, which is important too. So another behavior that you see by bears is something called a step-by-step trail or an ancestral trail, where the bears will go repeatedly over and over to the same spot. And when they go to those places, they will not only will they stop and like stomp their feet and mash their feet, which is really cool. If you're a little bear, the little bear will extend its stride to make sure it steps in all of the steps of the bears before it. And if it's a big bear, it will shorten its stride to make sure it's stepping in the exact same steps. Some of these trails have been known for generations and generations. I've heard that there are some in Alaska that are 3 feet deep from the number of bears that have been using them over and over again. I could go on and on about step-by-step trails. Like, if you're interested, give me a call and I'll be like, you'll get more than you want. But because one of the things that's so compelling is that the mama bears teach their cubs to step in these step-by-step trails. So you get things, you get generations of bears knowing about these same trails. So I have found some in Sonoma County. This is a photo that was just sent to me from Calabasas Creek, a regional park in southern Sonoma County. So really at the extent southern range of black bear habitat. Sheila Murphy, who works at Regional Parks, she's since been tracking bears. She's also on our collaborative. She found this step-by-step trail. And the reason I included it was because this was a place where bears were not previously seen, and a place that was burned almost to full completion in 2017. And yet here is a bear already not just walking around and ambling, but setting up a step-by-step trail, which means habitual use over and over again. So we're 3 years from that fire, and you can see how it's been regrown, and the bears are right there using it. This Alan Studley, he is one of our volunteers. There's a lot of words on this slide. I'll let you read it. But one of the things that was really compelling about this was how quickly the bears had come back to an area that had burned. This was the Glass Fire of 2020, and I think it was September, October. I actually was out there tracking bears for the DNA project and had to be evacuated, and we left. And yet within just days, Alan was picking up bears again in this walnut grove that hadn't burned. So as soon as we could get back out there, which was about 3 to 4 weeks after the Glass Fire, Alan and I were walking around. And one of the things that I see over and over again when I get into these burned areas is that they burn. Yes, they burn very hot in some places, and it can look like a moonscape, but they also burn in patches and to different degrees. And what I learned coming back on this landscape just within 3 weeks after that fire was that the bears knew where the patches were, because I was able to follow their tracks really easily through the ash, and they were moving from burned areas to places with patches to places that had not burned at all. Bears are inherently curious. They have incredible noses, so I'm sure that they can smell the difference between them, because I can smell the difference between a burned area. So they're being able to smell the difference between the burned area, fresh areas where water are. And they're also really habitual. And so they're still returning to places that had been burned out, and to see like what's going on. And this is all happening within days. One of the things that has been really clear to me, I've been working in habitat connectivity now for almost 2 decades, and the fires have just really depicted to me how completely important it is that we have space for wildlife. Humans evacuate and we go to other people's houses, or we go to shelters, or we can get in our cars and drive away. That is habitat connectivity for humans. We need to be able to get away. The bears, the deer, whomever it is, if we don't have places for them to be able to move, that's when we really start to see the decimation. The animals know how to live with fire. My friend Redbird, he is Pomo and Wapo. He tells me over and over, he's like, the animals know how to do it if they have space to go. And one of the things, this is a map taken actually from Pepperwood Collaborative, the Mayacamas to Berryessa, but I wanted to show you. So here we are, these are the southern Mayacamas. Here's Napa. Right here is the Tubbs Fire. These are the northern Mayacamas, where I was saying there's kind of that nexus and a really high diversity or high density of bears. So when I was tracking these bears, there was the Glass Fire that happened right about here, and there was a mom with triplets, and this whole area, was anywhere between 85% to 100% burn in this area. That mama bear with her 3 cubs was caught here 1 day later on a camera with her 3 cubs, because she was able to walk an open ridge all the way down. She has since, because she is so distinctive with her 3 cubs, has been since seen moving back into that area. Had she not had that open space, she probably would have perished. Also, the ability to have the connected habitat allows for that petchiness for animals to survive the first year or two when the food maybe has not grown in so well. And so, you know, people are like, oh, you're so lucky you get to work with bears. And I'm like, no, what I really work on is with people and maps and looking at a lot of stuff, so that I can ensure, and policy to ensure that we have space. You know, it's not just humans that really want space, it's the bears too. And here's one other, like,
Megan, can I say like a 5 minute? 5 to 10 minutes? Yeah.
Great, 5 to 10 minutes, good.
Somewhere in there.
Zoom past, that's okay.
Thanks.
So here's one more anecdotal thing about bears and trees and fire. So I just love this, babysitter trees. So bears use these trees as babysitters. A mom, she comes out of her den and she hasn't eaten for a couple months, and not only has she not eaten, but she's been nursing. So she comes out of the den and she is hungry, but she's got these little couple pound cubs that are, you know, tasty snacks for mountain lions and eagles and coyotes and whoever, but she's hungry and she needs to eat. So what she does is she uses these babysitter trees, and she's, you know, she'll slap the bottom of the tree, which is a signal, and the cubs go up the tree. And then she goes and forages, and she feels that they're safe in the tree, which they typically are. And when she's done, or they're ready to nurse, she'll slap the bottom of the tree and the bears come on down. And you can see, you know, see all these little patches. It's like little baby claw marks where they've flicked off the bark. So in Pepperwood, Stephen and I this was in 2020, we were out walking around doing our DNA survey. And sure enough, we would find these big old Doug firs that had burned, and yet there were fresh mama bear beds at the bottom, and some with little baby bear cub claw marks and larger ones post-burn. And so the moms were still using these large burned babysitter trees. The fire was not a deterrent for them using these trees and for continuing their behavior, which felt really exciting to me. And I think that idea of babysitters and that desire to care for your young really intertwines humans and bears. So bears predominantly are in the northern hemisphere of our planet. So if you have ancestry from the northern hemisphere, it is likely that someone in your ancestry had relationships with bears. And I can name many, many books that will go into bear culture around the northern hemisphere. This is a quote taken from a book called Giving Voice to Bear about this relationship in California with bears and humans. So just going to continue. Bears have been teaching humans for years. We have learned a lot of our plant foods and our medicinal foods from bears. This is a bear digging a root, and this is a young girl also digging an OSHA root here. In addition to this kind of food learning that we in addition to this kind of food sustenance medicine that we're learning, bears all around the northern hemisphere have been celebrated. They are emblematic of initiation, of deep ceremony. This is a picture drawn from England of the bear dances. This is a representation of the Chumash bear dance. This is Haida bear dance, which is in the Chumash are in Southern California. Haida is in Northwest Washington, and even the Inuits and the polar bears are dancing along. So we get this joy and we get this food sustainability from the bears and medicine from the bears, which brings it all together in this idea of food sovereignty. So as we're learning, when fires come through in a really cool, reasonable way, we get this flush of diversity of food, of insects, of fire response. And the bears, they eat what we eat. And the more that we get these really healthy, cool fires, repeated fires, fires that are done with consciousness, lands that are tended, we get a diversity of food. Right now I'm working on a project with the California Indian Museum and Cultural Center and their tribal youth. And while we are going to be looking at bears and out tracking bears, we're also including this big bear sovereignty piece. Because if you look at the diet of a bear, it matches the diets of indigenous people wherever they were in the Northern Hemisphere, and certainly in California. You know, here we have sockeye salmon, strawberries. These are pin cherries. I have eaten all of these a lot, and these are all deep, deep bear food. So there's this relationship of fire, bears, and food, and cultural diversity as well. Acorns are another favorite, and oak trees love fire. The one other thing I wanted to get into, this is from the Tubbs fire. This was a dogbane patch. Again, the blackberries had been taken. This is a Himalayan blackberry, and this is dogbane, which is a deep cultural plant. And so again, I know my time is short, but the importance of bears and fire and our culture and our resilience becomes instrumental. And now is the time for us to do the work. As the fires come through, we really have this opportunity to go in and to make sure that we are nurturing our native plants and the plants that we use for basketry, like the dogbane and the acorns, and really seeing, like, acorns are a perfect drought tolerant, high fat, high protein food that is native and prolific. And for, you know, most of human history in the Northern Hemisphere have been feeding people, whether you are in Korea or California. I'm going to have to skip through all of this. One of the things I did really, actually, let me go here, is to talk about community burns and how they're interlinked. So this is my friend Jay, and this is Redbird, who I had also a friend, but colleague, who I referenced earlier. This was a prescribed burn that we had done, a very small one that was maybe only 20 square feet, but it was on the deer grass. And this was the only green thing that was left after the Paradise fire. So this is post-Paradise fire. We went back to see how our prescribed burn had done, and it had survived. And right next to that in the creek were bear tracks. I think, Holland, is that my time? Should I bless through here?
Well, we've got 10 minutes till noon. So
okay, I can stay a little later for questions.
Okay.
I do just really want to talk about the importance of all of this being community oriented. I was recently able to participate in a community prescribed burn. This was out in pastures, and I think it was like October, November of, let me think, 2020. I guess it wasn't that recent then. And we were out here burning several hundred acres. CAL FIRE was out there, Fire Forward, the residents of this multi-thousand acre ranch. And here we are walking out there because this whole hillside was going to be burned down into some forest. But what I wanted to really stress here, this is Jay, who you'd seen, who had done the prescribed burn up in the Paradise fire. And this is a young student, Taylor, who is 16. And these are all the CAL FIRE people, and Redbird is standing over here. And what I want is the hats off to CAL FIRE, because they were willing to allow us, one, to have Redbird bless the fire that was coming in, to bring that in, to bring in his Pomo heritage and Coast Miwok heritage to this place. And then Jay and Taylor started the fire in a friction fire, which was how the Pomo people used to start their fires. And here's just a series of pictures. There is Taylor, a young, I think she's 16 right now, starting the fire. But I love this picture of CAL FIRE starting their drip torches from a fire that was blessed by Pomo. And I think what we're really engaged and interested in through the Bear Collaborative, this is just going back, is how do we bring these old and very, very effective traditional practices and bring them into best practices of biology? And how do we learn from the bears and from each other? Instead of having fire over here, wildlife over here, stewardship over here, is to really bring it into a web of relationships. And there's my talk. So.